So it looks like the Dutch have won the toss and chosen the Middlesex station. Surprised about that?
No. Did you want more?
Yeah.
I don't know, I think it's fun, isn't it? I think, no, we're of course surprised. Everyone usually chooses Surrey, don't they? Because you've got that big bend in the middle. But I suppose if you're doing shorter pieces, maybe it's a bit of a different opportunity to have an early lead and then to really challenge yourself in that middle part of the race. Generally, the crews that pick Middlesex, the crews that think the race is going to be close and they're going to need a boost at the end. Or maybe they just weren't really sure what was going on, so they just picked one.
I don't know, last year the Dutch got done by Cambridge off the start, and maybe this year they don't want to get done by Cambridge off the start, so they're choosing the best station in that respect.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they'll certainly have that last fixture in their mind, their last taste of this Cambridge outfit, so I think they will definitely be wanting to hit the ground running in this first piece.
There's Ed Bracey with his hand up. His dad Andrew is here watching the race. And Sarah Kauf, the near outer coxswain, with her hand up on the right hand side. We didn't mention her in the crew. Former lightweight rower who switched to coxing after she was hit by a car. And both Cox's hands are down. We're going to start imminently. Long stroke from the Dutch there on the first stroke.
Yeah, they looked like they had a plan to sort of, rather than take a very high, fast start, it was more of a considered, really get the boat up and rolling, which is probably a good way to get into a good, solid race pace.
I like the rock of Cambridge off the back, actually. They're up at high rate. They look to be rocking together.
Yeah, I agree. I think Cambridge look very compact into the front. I think that's coming from that really good stretch out off the back. Looks very compact, very simple, very effortless.
So, here we are in the opening moments. I think these guys are doing a couple of pieces, and this is the first of them, just off the start, going down the Fulham Wall. Maybe just the merest of lead by the Dutch, but as I say that, it's the parallax, you can't really tell on the parallax. Cambridge look ahead. Cambridge rating lower, 38.5 to the Dutch 40. That might help the Cambridge crew round the outside of this Middlesex bend.
Yeah, I mean, that's you've got to decide whether you're going to try and go a bit harder and hold on around the outside of the bend, or whether you're going to settle down onto a rhythm and potentially take a little bit of a chance with it. I think the thing that might complicate this race is it looks like there's some sailing boats that have just come out onto the course. So we're going to see if the crews need to navigate around that, and we'll see what impact that has now. These fixtures, there's a notice to mariners, so people know they're happening, but there's no river closure, so we do have to navigate other river users here as well.
Here we see Luca Ferraro on the edge of his shot, Tom Lynch in the 6th seat, King of TikTok, his hat set back. Behind Tom Lynch is Ken Copeland from the USA, and then Noam Moel, Frenchman, in the 4th seat. Behind him, sub Dane Halkew. Looks really clean, his blade, doesn't he, the sub for the Cambridge crew. And a great race in prospect. I think the Dutch will be pleased that they've not been left by Cambridge as they were last year.
Yeah, absolutely. A great start by both boats. It looks to me like the Dutch probably have a few more horses under the bonnet than Cambridge, but Cambridge to me look in a more efficient rhythm. So I would bet that as we come around this bend and onto the next straight, Cambridge are going to open out a little bit. But the crews are pretty level right now.
I'm also seeing a little bit more chop in the water now, even though we've got similar conditions. Oh, here we go.
Talk to us about that. They're coming together.
You just got to go as hard as you can here, as hard as you can. Just keep moving.
Yeah, get Balfour, that's the key. Get Balfour to keep rowing a good rhythm to get you out of there. I didn't see what happened in the lead up to it because of that change in the camera shot, so I'm not sure who was at fault for that. It looks like Cambridge, well, looks like they're about to go straight back into each other actually now.
So Matthew Pinsent is umpiring this race, and I'm not sure what he's going to be making of all this, but
and you see Cambridge actually lost it there. I think it was their 3 seats blade got turned around in his hands, and he recovered that really well, but those couple of strokes allowed the Dutch just back on even footing there, I would say.
So Bit of excitement in the middle. When you say you just got to keep going, can you just say a bit more about that, Henry, when the blades clash?
Well, it's very timely because I think we're going exactly in the same situation again. You've just got to try and keep as much momentum as you can, try and keep as much rhythm as you can. Anyone that's not in the clash has to try and get you either out of or more into the clash.
So Cambridge look to have rediscovered their rhythm. I think the Dutch are trying to row long. That rhythm set by Johan Salverde in the stroke seat. Mike Mantell, the world silver medalist in the 7 seat. Looking at the bows of the Dutch 8 there. Ollie van Boemen right up there on the left of your picture. And Cambridge just edging away now.
Well, there's going to be another clash again now, I think.
I think the Netherlands Cox is deliberately steering into Cambridge, which is it's difficult because Cambridge are trying to live by the rules of the boat race right now, and the crews that you're having in these fixtures don't. Have to.
And the Dutch have come off worse. Now you were actually saying that's the 2-man in the Dutch 8. Mats van Saben, the 23-year-old, has lost his blade. The Dutch are going to have to slow down. He won't be able to get it out of the water. Disaster for them, and you would say perhaps a bit deserved, Henry.
I would say so. I think like when you go into a clash, it's 50-50, and if you want to play by those rules, that's the thing that can happen. I think it's unfortunate that this fixture has ended in that way, but I think it's deserved.
So how much is that down to the Cox and Sarah Kauf of the Dutch talent group there?
I mean, they looked like they were coming in pretty close. If you look at where they are now, the Cambridge crew, if anything, looked like they'd been pushed quite tight there and had to actually really come back out. So I'm kind of surprised that, I mean, I don't know, I think if that clash had caused a problem in the Cambridge boat, that might have ended up in a disqualification for the Dutch.
Yeah, I didn't see what Matt Pinn said, the umpire of this boat, in a briefing, but I did see a briefing where Matt Smith basically read the riot act to them and said, if you clash, I'm going to disqualify you.
We've had to stop here. Looks like we're going to reset and get the crews.
Do you think so?
Or was that planned?
I think they're planning to do 2 half courses.
So
okay.
It would be help if we can have a look at that clash and let's see. So,
Well, which one? There were several.
Well, okay, who's at fault on this one, guys?
I'd say the Dutch.
I think I agree with Henry. Because
There's
look how you can see, if you look at the Cambridge boat, their boat's parallel to the bank, whereas the Cambridge crew were pointed in towards them.
And there's that crab caught by the Dutch 2-man Mats van Saben. And when you're in that situation, you just can't get the boat out because you've got blade out. You've got momentum on the boat, and I think we're going to see a restart. So we've seen that crab, but it does sound like Matthew Pinson is going to order a restart of the race.
I'd love to hear what Matthew's saying to them now.
Yeah, do you think he'll have 4 letters in?
No, he's too polite.
I think his head, Thought Bubble, will be doing 4 letters.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
But
He's got more self-control than we do, perhaps.
he should have.
The crews now, there will be adrenaline coursing through the veins, especially after those clashes now. So it'll be really interesting to see who can keep their head now, get into a fast rhythm and really shift into something that's effective and aggressive.
Looks like a standing start. Sarah Kauf with a hand up. Cambridge crew, well, they'll be pretty happy to have come out the clash on the right side. I don't know if they'll be starting level or the Dutch a little bit down, but what's this going to be going down to? Probably the steps, somewhere like that. There's Matt Pinson's voice. So the restart of that race is just off after the clash, which was disastrous for the Netherlands, but Cambridge will be loving the fact they came out the other side of it.
That was interesting. On that very first stroke, the Cambridge crew looked like they pulled round to stroke side, so it looked like they then had to kind of kink their way back out. They were pointed in a really nice direction, but it pulled them round a little bit. So they've had to make a little adjustment, but it doesn't look like it's bothered them. It looks, they look like they're on a strong rhythm. They're obviously taking this as a bit of a challenge, like, don't you come over here and cause these problems and want to show the Dutch what's what.
Maybe that's good for Tom Marsh and the sub Dane Halkier, the Canadian, who are rowing on bow side. Perhaps they've got a little bit too much in the end of their blades, but Cambridge have got a lead on the inside of the Surrey Bend. Again, there's that nice swing off the back, coached of course by Rob Baker. They've been on training camp in Portugal. Unlike the Oxford crews, both of whom stayed to do a training camp on the Tideway, and going out to nearly a length's lead.
Fantastic move by Cambridge. They really seized the initiative early, very reminiscent of the Trial 8 performance from their winning boat. They just, at the end of the day, this is an 8s race. You've got to seize the initiative early. You've got to get the speed up and then just tap it along. And I think they've done that really, really well here.
They didn't mess around at all on those first few strokes, did they? Even with that little kick, they just went for it.
Yeah, do you think there's a bit of tideway savviness from the Cambridge crew that perhaps the Dutch in head-to-head races, might be losing out a little bit? Certainly from the start of the very first piece, the Dutch were determined not to be led, but it looks like Cambridge had the bit between their teeth on the start of that re-row, and just taking it out on the Dutch now. I mean, really, this is how much water they can put between them and the Dutch, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. They want to send a message, of course, and I think it's definitely a demonstration of a little bit of savviness from the Cambridge guys. You could see at the start all the launches that were following the crews had stopped, and the wash from those launches was catching up, and they were starting in wash.
Yep.
Cambridge is able to just have that little bit more savviness in there.
Even now it looks quite bouncy, and obviously much bouncier for the Dutch crew being behind, because they've got the wash of Cambridge to contend with as well. But this is the thing, when the tide comes up this high, even if the conditions look good, even if it's not too windy, there's just a lot of water coming down, so you're going to get that bounce.
I think looking at the Dutch, they look quite comfortable and they look quite good, but they just aren't moving as quickly as they could. I mean, there just isn't the aggression and the bite there. And you can't row along looking comfortable and good, can you? You've got to be aggressive in the boat race. And I think if you look at the Cambridge crew, there is that aggression, but it's kind of controlled aggression and bite there.
It's a pretty disappointing performance, I'd say, from this Dutch crew, given the names on paper that were in the boat. I think Cambridge they're just walking away with this.
Yeah, I think it is a shame, because I think the Dutch certainly showed good speed, but I think they were just a little bit too aggressive with the steering in that first part of this first race, I guess.
It looks like the Dutch have settled. We're going to lose this piece, so maybe regroup and reform for the next one. I guess it must be feeling a bit dispirited in the Dutch boat now, but Cambridge are going to be loving this. I mean, they're just pushing away. This is going to be a bigger margin than they won the first piece last year when the Dutch came over, and Rob Baker's going to be smiling all over his face, I think, the Cambridge coach.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, right from the first stroke, it looked like they were executing a very efficient style of rowing, and it looks to me like they've been able to do that all the way through this, in the pressure of kind of out of this world clashing, and then as soon as they were clear, they got back into what they want to do, kept it calm, kept it effective, and I think it's an impressive performance.
So I think this race will be to Chiswick Steps, which Cambridge will be reaching shortly. This is kind of, I guess, the end of the first piece proper, which was interrupted when the crews clashed. Matthew Pinson ordered a restart, which Cambridge took absolute advantage of, and moved inch by inch, metre by metre away from this Dutch crew, and heads go down. Michael Mansell in the 7th seat. Obviously the Dutch crew will be looking to him a lot for leadership in this next piece that they do.
I think certainly. Michael Mansell has a tremendous experience in the 8 and experience in the 8 of things going wrong. I think back to the European Championships in 2022 when their boat almost stopped in the first 500 metres and they rallied in the race to come through for a silver medal. So they've got a lot of experience of coming through adversity.
But I think that's maybe what Cambridge have that the Dutch don't, is they probably started thinking about those boat race what ifs. So, they probably already had a bit of a plan for what happens if we have to stop the race and start again, or what happens if we clash. Whereas, the Dutch, this is not what they're preparing for. They're not preparing for the boat race. So maybe they hadn't quite had the opportunity to actually go through some of those scenarios to prepare for them.
Well, last year, the Dutch team got beat by Cambridge by 2 lengths in the first piece, and then they kind of decided, right, we're not going to let that happen again, and they ended up turning the tables on Cambridge. I don't know if this Dutch team so far has shown that level of commitment and savviness to actually say, right, we're going to do something different. Maybe we're going to be a little more aggressive off the start, take a bit of leadership. I don't know if their coaching team with Pete Weirsom is going to maybe have a word with the guys or leave it to them, but something needs to happen from the point of view of the Dutch team to make this last race a contest.
think the other thing that's quite hard is when you've had a piece like that where you've had lots of clashes and you really tense up in those clashes, to then actually relax back into your rhythm and have confidence and trust in what you're doing, you're almost always looking over your shoulder a little bit thinking like, am I going to hit them again? So it's having that confidence to just kind of switch that first piece off and reset. I think that's, that will be quite important here for them.
There's not a lot of chat going on in that Dutch boat, is there? Someone's got to be taking leadership, I guess, in that boat and saying, right, let's take hold of it, this is what we're going to do in this second piece. I wonder, guys, do you think the Oxford Dark Blues, I imagine if you're watching this, Oxford, I hope you've had a great training block on the Tideway. Looking forward to seeing your fixtures coming up, the Oxford men that is. Do you think there's anything the Oxford men have seen to worry them here in terms of their boat race opponents from Cambridge?
I've got to say, I think it's quite difficult to tell from that first piece because I think so much of it came down to those decision making, the sort of decision making by the cocks, the steering, bits and bobs like that. She looks like now she's questioning whether or not there's something wrong with the rudder. So whether that might have contributed to those clashes, some of those steering problems. So I don't know. I think it's quite difficult to kind of read much into that performance.
Yeah, I think it's really hard. It's really hard to read too much into that. This is a tough moment for the Dutch cocks here. They're trying to see if they've bent the rudder properly on boating, and it seemed like they were steering pretty aggressively towards the stroke side. So there's potential that there could be some damage there.
So how fine-tuned are the rudders for you guys as coxers?
Well, this obviously isn't their boat. I mean, they're rowing in a Cambridge boat, so I think they've probably got into this boat yesterday, maybe at best. So she won't have had a huge amount of opportunity. I mean, really, when you get into a boat as a cox, you should be setting that boat up for you. So, you should be putting the handles at the right distance for you. You should make sure you've got a seat pad that allows you to be comfortable to sea. But a lot of coxes either don't know to do that, don't have the opportunity to do that, don't think to do that. So, it's difficult, especially when it's not your boat, to have things really set up nicely for your preferences.
Yeah, so a reminder, if you just tuned in, we watched the first piece, which Cambridge won pretty impressively from the Dutch after a clash, which we think was the fault of the Dutch 8. But, maybe there's something that's not quite right with the rudder. Sarah Kalf is having it checked by the Dutch coaching staff there. We're going to be going into a second piece. The Dutch will have the advantage of that bend on the Middlesex bank. Matthew Pinsent was trying to arbitrate between the two crews in the clash. I think that was a bigger clash as we've seen. The umpires tend to be much more strict these days about the crews staying apart.
And then round like that.
So they're going to paddle back upstream. So downstream, round that bend, is the finish where they're headed, and they're probably going to paddle back up into the bank and start, I guess, at Chiswick Steps. And well, hopefully, we're all really excited that the Dutch 8 are going to really decide this is going to be a very different piece to the first one, and blast off and put Cambridge under real pressure on the outside of Cambridge on the outside of the bend.
Yeah, I think that we've still got a really good race in store. I think that what the Dutch showed in that last piece was that they have a lot of horsepower. I think if they just allow themselves to use it and don't be disturbed by steering and clashes, I think they will be a lot more dangerous for Cambridge.
I kind of want to see just a bit more aggressivity. I think, I'm not sure nicey quite works on Tideway head-to-head clashes. I appreciate what you're saying about once you get in the rhythm in the middle of your piece, but you've got to get into the piece first, haven't you? And they just got wasted by Cambridge on the first part of that sort of restarted piece.
It's a funny, when they restarted the piece, you could hear as soon as I don't imagine there's too many spectators there, but you could hear as soon as they said go, there was a lot of screaming and shouting, which I thought, is that coming from one of the boats there? Is that coming maybe from the Dutch boat? I remember when I kind of moved from under 23 into senior coxing, something that Jürgen and Christian Felker would always say is like, is to not do that, to not have that shouting, and to just be the quiet, almost silent assassin, focus on what you're doing. Don't try and overly arouse yourself by screaming and shouting. I wonder if that perhaps played into it a bit.
I think especially off the start, because ultimately in the first 10, 20 strokes, nothing the cox is going to say is going to make any difference. You know your start sequence. You know, you might be there to say, okay, legs on this one, go, but you know, if you're having to really set the rhythm with your voice, then there's probably a bit of a lack of preparation there.
Oh, sorry, I meant this almost from the rowers. I wonder if it was from the rowers
yes.
as well.
Agreed, yeah.
But I mean, it's hard to tell. But that was the sort of thought that came into my mind at that point. It just sounded a little bit wild.
Yeah, so let's talk about the Cambridge rhythm. Matt Edge in the stroke seat, Luca Ferraro anchoring the boat behind him from the 7th seat, the big Canadian Tom Lynch in the 6th seat. How was that working for them, and what's that going to give them in the boat race?
I think it was working really well. I mean, Matt Edge is such an experienced oarsman in boat races, having of course won last year, and then I think he's done lightweights before that, and maybe even the reserve race before that. He's done so many, so I think he knows exactly the rhythm that he wants to set, and he's doing a great job of that. And being backed up by Luca, who's looks like perhaps a really exciting emerging talent. I think they're a very effective combination.
They're quite a young crew, but they don't act like it. They act with a confidence that I'd say you'd see perhaps from a crew with a few more years on them, which I really like.
I totally agree. So I think there is a sort of a wisdom about how they work, which is impressive.
So we've just been handed a little result sheet from Ian Weir here. So in the first piece between Cambridge men and Dutch, it was stopped, as you saw, after Netherlands crab in Cambridge University water. So confirmation of what we were saying there, that the fault was on the part of the Dutch. The restart piece, Cambridge University won by 3 lengths. As far as Goldie versus Thames go, on piece 1, Cambridge won by a length, or 2 lengths I got there. But on the second piece, I think Cambridge University, which was from the Chittigate to the finish, similar piece to what we're going to see today, Cambridge University were disqualified, which is, you don't often see that, do you?
No, you don't see that. I would love to see some footage of that.
Yeah.
I guess they were probably on a disadvantageous position, trying to take a risk with the umpire, which you just can't afford to do in these races.
So the umpire of that race was Kath Finnecane, who showed her teeth, showed her mettle to disqualify Goldie, the Cambridge University reserves. They're quite close, the two crews there.
They are. This part of the track, when you start the race from here, when I've done fixtures like this, it's quite swirly. You kind of feel like you're being chucked this way and that, and I think it's quite risky to start so close, because you can suddenly find yourself in a position you haven't planned to be in.
This was what the restart of my 2012 boat race looked like, I'd say. At pretty much this exact point of the course.
What's going through your mind now,
water.
Zoe?
Well, I was going to say, starting close is not always a bad thing, because then you know where the other crew are, and you know, as long as you keep the distance, it's fine. Often it's more dangerous to start far apart, because both crews then, you know, try and converge and go too far. But like you say, it's a swirly bit of water, so it's it's hard to kind of go where you want to go sometimes.
Cambridge on the inside here, they'll be thinking, okay, we've got a little bit of Surrey Bend to go, we've got to absolutely maximise the first 2 minutes here, hold on through the straight, and then defend through that last part of the bend. The Dutch, I'm not sure how savvy they're going to be, how much they know about the course, but what they need to do is hold contact in these first 2-3 minutes.
A little bit of swell on the water there, isn't there? Just, you know, could be unsettling in the start. Got to stay clean.
Go!
Matt Pinsent. Big long stroke from the Dutch again. What are we going to see as they go through the gears? Just a little bit edging towards the Cambridge crew.
Straight away coming together again. I mean, if I was umpiring this, I wouldn't be happy. And actually, Cambridge being warned there rather than the Dutch crew. It looks like the Dutch, I mean, they have those slower first few strokes, but then they do really creep up there on the rate. They get moving, and they've had quite a chunky start there.
Yeah, they absolutely have. I think another challenge for the Coxes now, which is a bit of a strange one, is the sun. It's quite low in the sky. It's going to be quite hard to steer. They're steering into it. I'm sure they're wearing eye protection, but I mean, when you're out there, you've got the sun beating down and reflecting up at you from the water. I think it's a real challenging moment for the Coxes here to navigate this next bit.
Well, we were saying we were looking forward to an exciting piece, and the Dutch have got the bit between the teeth. Someone said something in the crew. or maybe it's been collected. They have blasted off the start, and you can see the last of the Cambridge bend is now unfolding. The Dutch have a lead, and the bend is going to unfold for the Dutch crew. I guess that's what Rob Baker, the Cambridge coach, wants. He wants his crew to be tested rowing down, doesn't he?
And once again, we've got all those sailing boats that have just come out. Something else for them to contend with, something else for Matthew Pinson to make sure everyone steers round safely. But this start from the Dutch has looked pretty punchy. And now again, I'm going to get my favourite moment of hopefully seeing two crews go together under Barnes Bridge.
Yeah, safety is the main concern of the umpires, whether it's in the boat race or fixtures. So Matt Pinson will stop the race if he thinks it's unsafe. But Cambridge, to me, the rhythm looks good. You know, they've been bettered off the start. They look like they've got a base to build from if they need. The Dutch are being more aggressive. They have the inside of the bend. I mean, I wouldn't like to call this race at the moment.
No, I think it's a really tough one to call. You've got to say the momentum is with the Dutch, but Cambridge doing pretty well there. I think Cambridge look like they're rowing well. My concern would be that with all the sailing boats predominantly on the right side of the picture there, that the umpire is going to push the race a little bit towards the left, which would favour the Dutch even more. But it looks like the sailing boats are under control, and we've got a pretty clear route, so hopefully that's not going to play a part.
Matt Edge, we talked about his stroking. Luca Ferraro behind him, Tom Lynch, the sixth man behind him, the American Ken Copeland and his cap set back. The Dutch still maintaining that lead, but it's very close. Cambridge look to be rowing well. They don't look rattled at the moment, and I guess it's going to be what the Dutch can do. They'll want to stay apart, the two coxes, won't they?
They will here. I think it's Cambridge really just have to start asserting themselves now. They haven't got their bows in front yet. They have to do that, and I think the Coxes are doing a good job of keeping it clean. But I think what I would really like to see is the Cambridge boat starting to add a bit of momentum to what they're doing, so they can defend something rather than having to attack while being on the outside of the turn.
There's that glinting of the sun that you spoke about, and Cambridge are not being bettered here. They are right in there, and you know, I think this is Cambridge's race to take. It would be a famous victory if they won against the Dutch round the outside of the bend. It's going to be fascinating to see that more aggressive start, what it might take out of the Dutch crew, or if that inside bend is going to be to their advantage. There's Matt Edge looking pretty smooth.
Here we go.
Little clash. Luca Ferraro just lost his blade a little bit there, didn't he? The seven man in Cambridge.
And that was both crews being warned there, so that's kind of on both of them really to make a change. But again, it just looks like they're not really able to stay straight alongside each other. There's just a bit of bounce coming in and out, which is making it much more challenging. But I think Cambridge have done a really, really good job in that last minute, and if anything, they've now put their bows out ahead.
I would say the Dutch are starting to blow now. I think Cambridge have got some really good momentum. Dutch are looking quite fluffy around the front, a bit out of time with the spoon work. Cambridge staying tight to the water, one placement, and really accelerating. I think even on the outside of the bend, the momentum is now with the light blues.
Yeah, we should say, of course, this Dutch Talent 8, mostly under 23s, have had injuries. They've had to fly people in at the last minute, like Nicholas Dirksvager rowing in the 6th seat, to be fair, but nevertheless the Dutch all have a very unified style of rowing. Cambridge have their own sub on board in the 3 seat, of course, for the president, Seb Benzakri, got Dane Halkew, so both crews have got subs on board.
I do wonder if the Dutch Cox is actually struggling with the steering a bit, because it looks like she's trying to steer the boat, and it looks like she's kind of waving a bit at the umpire as if to be like, yeah, I'm trying to move, but the boat's not really going the way she wants it to.
Yeah, she's got a bit of a lean on her towards the bow, so you can see her right hand looks like it's further forward, like she is trying to steer. It looks like she has started to be able to get some steering, but whatever's going on there, and I think it's the rowing of the Dutch boat is starting to fall apart a little bit as well. I mean Cambridge looks like they've just taken half a length.
Yep.
On the outside of the bend, I mean, that rhythm has held. They look pretty good off the start, I thought, you know, and just nice compact back turn, good cohesive body swing in the crew.
I think Cambridge are looking actually better and better again as they go down the track, even with the fatigue that will be coming through in the legs, in the arms and the bodies. They look like they've kind of relaxed, and sometimes I think getting a bit tired can actually make you relax and strengthens the rhythm.
Having said that, looking at the stern pair of that Dutch boat, they look completely spent, and it's just all up in the shoulders. And I think they've absolutely given everything they could, and they've got nothing left now. I think this is Cambridge's race all the way.
When you say up in the shoulders, Henry?
So it looks to me like the shoulders of the stroke man, particularly of the Dutch boat, looks like they're wide and they're high. I would really want my crews to have low shoulders, to have a bit of space. I'd want to be able to see their neck, for instance. It just looks very tense, and they're not moving.
You almost want to be able to look at the rowers from the waist up, and it looks like they're not racing, right? You want it to look so relaxed in that upper part of the body, but then when you look down at the legs, that's where you see the power and you see the work.
So Cambridge showing the benefits they've had from their training camp in Portugal, rowing beautifully at this early stage of the season in January. And well, I think first of all they'll be sending a message to themselves that we can row away around the outside of the bend, and then of course I guess sending a message to the Dark Blues, Oxford, who will open their fixture account I think on the 3rd of February against Thames Rowing Club's A-Crew. But this will be a significant feather in the cap for the Light Blues if that margin is maintained towards the finish.
Yeah, it's a great example of eights racing. Both boats were pretty evenly matched off the start, and it's just, okay, right, who's going to crack first, who's going to blow first, and today it was the Dutch.
Yeah, the Dutch crew there looking more and more ragged actually as they come towards the line. You can see the blades aren't going in the water together, they're not coming out of the water together. You know, it does look like it's the wheels really coming off there.
I think they're coming off to such an extent that I think that's going to impact the steering, if nothing else.
Agreed.
Cambridge across the line, I'd say that's about a 3 length, maybe even 4 length victory over the Dutch men, who have stopped paddling I think just before the finish line. Not quite the standard of the Dutch talent women we saw race the Cambridge women, not quite as high standard in that Dutch men's 8.
No, I think you're right. I think that Dutch women's 8 looked like the kind of crew that you would see at the top of the Remenham, or even trying to qualify for the Olympics potentially, whereas that Dutch men's 8 did look more like a sort of a development boat, I'd say.
Yeah, with Mike Mantle, of course, for that world silver medal we talked about, but of course the Dutch senior men took silver behind the British at the World Championships last year. Cambridge just paddling away. I mean, what are they going to think about that, those guys? I mean, they're obviously going to be pleased with what they've shown emerging out of the clash. I mean, how much can they take away from that contest?
I think they can take a huge amount of confidence from that. I think they were under a lot of pressure. Certainly in that second piece, to be on the outside and to come through like that was really, really positive. I think if you were perhaps Rob, the coach, Rob Baker, might have been a little bit disappointed in the first piece that they weren't allowed to actually row it out because of the aggressive steering. But having said that, it's the boat race, it's the tideway. It can throw up unexpected things, and the skill in a sense is to deal with those unexpected curveballs and to come out on top, which is what they did today.
You have to race the race you're in.
Yeah.